I will go ahead and start us off by reading our first people statement, and then we will get right into it. So, Toro University, California sits on traditional unceded lands of the Karkin people, one of the 8 Ohlone tribes in the Bay Area that was part of the unratified treaties of 1851 and 1852. Solano County is also the historic home to various tribes of the Patwin and Miwok people. So I am excited today. It's unfortunate that it took a cancellation for me to think about this particular webinar, but we've been doing, or I've had the pleasure of working with the gentlemen that are on our panel today for the last few years around violence prevention. And there's a unique intersection when it comes to this work and the work of educators. And so I was like, hey, we need to do a panel around this and really have a conversation, because when you look across the state of California over the last year, when you look across the nation over the last year, violence has increased dramatically in every metropolis around the country, and even increased across the world, right? So this is not just a U.S. problem, but when we look at the U.S. context, violence has increased. And so it is imperative, for us to have a conversation about not just what goes into the work of stopping the violence, but how the field of education really can contribute to that work. So, but before we get into the conversation, I want to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their work. Both of them are amazing men. We still have one more that we're hoping to join us, but the two that are here are both amazing men who, if I may say so myself, they both are giants in the field that we're in. So I'll start with Brother Ray Lozada, and then we can move to Brother Khalid Mutaki and have them introduce themselves and say a little bit about, the work that they do. So Brother Ray.
All right. Well, thank you. If I'd have known you had Khalid here today, I'd have stayed home. So I appreciate it. It's always an honor to collaborate and, to have conversation about solutions, But anyway, I have a whole bunch of thoughts and a whole bunch of feelings that are going on because I continue to engage in the work. But I recently retired from the probation department after 26 years and stepped into a position at the school district as a director of safe schools. So dealing with violence and youth violence and seeing the trends, the negative group interactions has been something that I've always been drawn to, probably because I can correlate it with life experience. Coming up, I'm from Modesto, California, Central Valley. I understand the value of culture. I'm half African-American and half Mexican. Probably the most valuable experience is life experience, and that, dealing with a teenage mom and growing up, dealing with poverty issues and whatnot. I understand those emotional needs that are seated in a lot of the behaviors that we see. So it's with that, I came to Sacramento. I was playing football at Sac State and ended up getting into the work. Started off with a group home was my first job. So working with people and learning and my own life experience and being able to work with folks professionally has definitely provided the primary insight as to what's going on in our communities, especially when we're talking about inequity, poverty, racism, and all the other issues that seem to be now being a part of a real conversation. So I'm honored to be here today.
Appreciate you, Brother Ray, and Brother Khalid. If you don't mind giving us a little introduction to yourself.
Yes, sir. First of all, thanks for having me, brother. It's an honor and a pleasure and a privilege. Um, yeah, man. I would say my entry into this work was first through the county as a social worker. I worked for Yellow County, actually in West Sacramento, for 6 years as a social worker, and you know, that provided direct services to what we used to call back then the hard to serve populations, primarily youth populations, which included foster youth. It also included what we call serious violent offenders, a lot of them coming back from California Youth Authority, or at that time, what was very popular was youth camps. They used to send them away to camps, contracted private camps, and they'll be coming back from then. And then also service what we call parenting teens. Did that for 6 years, man, and just gained a lot of valuable experience. Before I got into the quote unquote violence prevention world, which happened when I was working for the city under Mayor Kevin Johnson, when he initiated what was back then called the Mayor's Gang Prevention Task Force. And anybody's familiar with Mayor Kevin Johnson, former Mayor Kevin Johnson, he was a big supporter and a big believer in prevention, and specifically education as it relates to that prevention. So we had a lot of discourse with the community, with various stakeholders on this topic as far as the intersection of education and violence prevention. And we put a lot of our effort for that reason in the prevention side of the framework. And when I say prevention, primarily speaking with younger youth under 18, trying to deal with some of the lower and medium risk youth, working closely with school districts, restorative justice, literacy programs, after school programs, expanding capacity of boys and girls clubs, things of that nature. And then recently for me, you would think you might want to say I kind of did a 360 as far as my theory of change when it comes to community safety, and realizing that even though we was doing, and I say we as a community, in other words, the city and about 21 contracted community-based nonprofit organizations, we're all doing a great collective work in the prevention space. But our violence still kept going up. It kept going up, even withstanding that work. And so I kind of had a light bulb moment. We kind of had a light bulb moment and realized we had to do more in the intervention space, the interruption space. Hence, we started a program or contracted with a program called Advanced Peace, and we can talk some more about that later. But that's my work. My work in that space has been primarily in gun violence interruption for the last several years, last 2 or 3 years.
Well, I kind of want to start there, and it's interesting because the both of you in the last couple of years have transitioned into new positions, which is giving you a new lens or a different lens on the same work. But Brother Khalid, when we were talking the other day, you were saying we should start by distinguishing between prevention, intervention, and interruption. And so I was wondering, hopefully both of you can kind of chime in on that, but what is the difference between those three different strategies?
I mean, I can share my viewpoint on it. I think, depending on the literature, there's different framings of it. The federal folks and DOJ kind of have their framing. The public health field kind of has their framing. A lot of it does overlap, and I can share some of those things that do overlap. So, in general, when you say prevention, in general, you're talking about, like I said, younger youth. You're talking about juveniles under 18, and you're also generally talking about young people that are lower risk. So, or even just general at risk. And we know any youth can be technically at risk, but some that do have some risk factors, they're lower risk, generally under prevention. So most young people, they're gonna be okay. They're gonna go through some struggles as young people, as growing up, as all young people do. But they'll be okay. They got enough skill sets and enough support to make it through. And so that's the prevention side. On the intervention side, you're talking primarily of young people. They could be some younger, primarily a little bit older, that have multiple risk factors. In other words, they might fall in the more medium to high risk range that make them where it's time to intervene to disrupt some of those, to address some of those risk factors. So, for example, a young person who may ditch school every now and then, there might be something to be done on the prevention side, whereas a person who's on the brinks of dropping out, they're failing classes, they failed the whole semester. That requires a different kind of intervention. And then interruption, at least as it relates to gun violence, I'll say is the high risk, main players, key main factors that are actually causing a lot of the damage and real time, in the community that are for example, carrying weapons that are at the center of some of the recent activities and violence that's recently happened and find themselves directly connected to it. That takes more of an immediate type of disruption, interruption that needs to be had. So that's, like I said, a lot of it does have some overlap, but in my mind, those are kind of the distinguishing layers of prevention, intervention, and interruption.
Ray, did you have anything to add to that? I appreciate the way you kind of broke that down for us in terms of the three.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to add, but I just would note that most of what we're talking about has to do with relationships and building relationship with folks. And in the prevention realm, it's before they make a decision. It's based on what you see going on, the trauma exposure, what's going on in the family, and the way they're responding to some of that. The intervention, from my experience, it's when you're dealing with, with people and they're actually living in it, and the risk factors are there, and it's being compounded, more than just not going to school or not using their time wisely or substance misuse, but you tend to have a culmination of all of it. And then on the interruption, that's because we know they're already engaged in violence, and it's about preventing ongoing harm or retaliation, and looking for opportunities to help a person see the need to heal and to progress out of violence or out of acting out. So, but it's all, I think we're saying the same thing. It's like I said earlier, if I would have known you had Khalid on here, I'd have stayed home. And I'm saying that because we've intersected in working together over the years. And I think the reason we have, I know I have the regard that I do is because we do see things similar when we're talking about the value and the dignity of people. So I would say it's seated in relationship.
One of the most alarming things about the last year of violence prevention work is not just the uptick in violence, but the explosive uptick in violence among young people 18 and under. I know that in Sacramento, we experienced about a 300 to 400% increase in youth homicides. But just in looking across the board in the state of California, if you look at Oakland, if you look at Richmond, you look at LA, right? Like 18 and under youth homicides just kind of really exponentially grew last year. being that both of you, one, Ray, you're coming from the school district lens, Khalid, you're coming from the community lens. How do you begin to identify and distinguish, those different levels of intervention, particularly when youth aren't in school right now? They're at home, they're in the community. Like how do you really go about saying, okay, these young people are in this category, and so we know what kind of work to do with them to kind of get ahead of that?
I mean, so I would say that, yeah, so when we're talking, once again, in the frame of gun violence specifically, because obviously there's a lot of different components and layers when we're talking about violence prevention, because obviously we have unfortunately experienced a significant uptick in gun violence in Sacramento and other cities. I would say the same thing has happened related to domestic violence, child abuse, and other forms, suicide, youth suicides, unfortunately. So there's we have a serious situation going on with our young people right now coming out of this pandemic. So even after, we get through the pandemic, there's going to be a significant amount of psychological and trauma that has to be addressed. It's going to be ongoing for years in trying to help our young people move forward. So, I mean, for us, I mean, as Brother Ray said, it comes down to relationship. I mean, what we've experienced with all the shutdowns and everything is, I mean, there's no support system. You're talking about young people who, when the stay at home order came out back in April or May, I mean, home is not a safe place. So what do you, it's different if you're doing a stay at home and you live in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, but if you're living in a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment with 3 other siblings and in an abusive situation, that's not really a viable option. So most of the young people we serve, I guess is my point, is they never did the stay at home. They was on the streets. And so now you're on the streets and you don't have anything to do. You don't have anywhere to go. And so, and then there's always a social media component to this. And so young people already spend a lot of time on social media. Now they're spending even more time on social media. And so you got cyber banging, that goes on, that was already happening, and now is even happening at a higher proportion. And then if I'm a young person, I got all this extra time on my hands that I know where you live. I know you ain't got nowhere to go. It ain't like you can be at the Boys and Girls Club. You're gonna be at school. You can't be. I know what neighborhood you live in. It's easier to slide. You know what I mean? And so it's a lot of different factors that factor in. Obviously, drug abuse, substance abuse is a big one. We got this whole EDD scam that happened. It seemed disproportionately in California. I can't point to another state that really where it happened like it did in California, but it happened to a tremendous amount in California where the EDD, scandal, it impacted the amount of guns and the availability of guns in our neighborhood. So, like I said, there's a lot of layers, man, that come with it. Youth are definitely our youth are even more vulnerable and more at risk than they was before, which is hard to believe, but it's true.
Yes, absolutely. School age kids being killed and doing the killing is what the trend has been, at least for the last year. And so when we're talking about already traumatized or dealing with violence to some degree before the pandemic, not having those natural touch points, not having that natural engagements, even going to school, even sitting in class, all of that relationship, just being shut off And more than that, all of what we would consider, or who we consider help in regard to allies, not having access to our students, really created, kind of the perfect storm, the pressure. And even though run into the community violence, or violence generally speaking, is a drain, it's still a release. And so when we're talking about adolescents and mental health issues that need to be addressed, cultural considerations, when we're talking about what depression looks like to some of our communities, instead of acting inward and being hopeless to harm myself, a lot of times we act out with the willingness to harm somebody else. That's what we see going on. And to the point of this is, as much as we'd like to discard it and act like it's a byproduct of what's going on these days, it meets a lot of emotional needs: to be liked, to have friends, to be followed, and all of the things that would come naturally with engagement. Now we're competing with a worldwide situation, and it's safe to say that a lot of the ways of dealing with issues aren't positive, right? Because when we're talking about behavior or outlets, we want our young people to utilize the healthy outlets, the healthy relationships. Well, what does that even look like these days? The more extreme, the more hits, the more views, it's been redefined as the thing. And I think what we find is ourselves as systems in particular, that we're already not serving public service institutions, that were already not doing a good job. Now what you see is it's an exploitation of those weaknesses, right? You didn't have the answers then. Now you're really scrambling. And I think what it's going to take the voice of lived experience folks, people that have been there, that have credibility in our communities, that are living by example, to have access as part of the solution. Number one, when we're talking about violence and these trends, and also for our systems to make room for those relationships, and to get back into some type of engagement. So, that's a loaded, there's a lot of components to that answer, but we all have to come together, all hands on deck, and it's time to get people in our systems that aren't organically interested in our young people, or have a problem recognizing the inequities that are going on. You got to get some other folks to the forefront in leadership, and I'm hoping that what's going on right now, that people will see the need to get out of the way, because we can't continue to be bogged down with being ineffective and then refuse to get out of the way. We have to put folks in place that are going to actually make things happen and understand, because truly what we're talking about is, we're talking about the issues that are going on in neighborhoods that are already suffering from poverty a lot of the times. Not across the board. Mental health issues are also impacting the suburbs, and we know domestic violence has gone up. But when we're talking about the acting out, there's a cultural correlation to that. And I think we just have to be willing to express that, see the strengths in that, and know how to build on it. And I just don't think we do a very good job of that.
You both said something very interesting. I'm like putting all these pieces together in my mind. I remember when I was working in Vallejo for one of the continuation schools there, and I remember the kids came to school one day and they was just really hyped, right? They was really hyped, and like on site when one of the kids seen another kid, a little altercation broke out, and it turned out that, they had all went to the park the previous day to fight. And the kids brought the video of them fighting, and showed us them fighting and all that stuff. But I just remember then saying to myself, like, we don't have a handle on social media. Like our kids, when they leave school, they get on social media and it's a whole nother world. And like half of our issues, if not more than half of our issues at school, started online. It was something that was happening in the social media world that would then spill on the campus. But as you were saying there, Ray, like we forget what the socializing aspect of school had on the mental health of young people. And so now that you don't have that, not only am I forced to kind of almost exclusively live in this, virtual social media environment to get my socialization with other kids, other youth my age, but as adults, as a system, we already didn't have any, like we only knew what was going on because the kids came to school every day and they told us and they showed us. Now it's like we're completely out of the loop of what's happening in that space. That space really is, they talked about the Wild Wild West. That's really kind of what social media is. It's like the Wild Wild West because there is no governance when it comes to our young people in that space. And I'm sitting here wondering, like, how do we even infiltrate that space to provide that governance to kind of address some of these issues before they even spill out into, the real world, so to speak? Because once we get it, it's already, the damage has already been done. And so that one's just kind of like sitting on the forefront of my mind. It's like, man, like now these kids are getting ready to go back to school after having no governance for a year. And how is that going to like now play out when they get back in each other's presence every day? That really wasn't the question. I was just kind of sharing my thoughts as I'm thinking about everything that is being said. That and the other thing that stood out to me, I've been kind of saying this too, but Khalid, the way you just said it really it struck me. Home is not a safe place, right? Like not even realizing like how many of our young people, the violence for them doesn't begin in the streets. It begins at home and dealing with, whether it's physical violence, verbal violence, sexual violence that exists in their homes. And what we're getting is really kind of just a byproduct of the lack of safety that they're experiencing there. I gotta think of a question. I'm just
No, you good, man. I say, man, those, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things we know is that, we say, so a lot of the individuals that end up in the prison industrial complex or end up as shooters in the neighborhood or what have you, we often say the shooters and the victims are the same, right? Because these individuals, you can trace their anger, their frustration, whatever is driving them to this point in their life. You can trace it a lot of times back to, what we call often adverse childhood experiences, or I would say childhood traumas. And so, we was talking to one of the OG guys the other day, and he, after going through a certain amount of life skills training and, emotional intelligence training and what have you, he came to realize when I was shooting out there in the neighborhood, the way he put it was, I thought was very poetic, is I wasn't shooting at my enemy, I was really shooting at my dad, because he came to realize that a lot of his anger and what he had been carrying around his whole adult life traced back to the anger he had to his dad as a child. And so, most folks don't come to that level of awareness, but you can trace it back. I mean, we know, for example, when you look at places like Folsom Prison, 78% of those individuals, just bringing it back to education, are functionally illiterate, right? So they have less than an 8th grade reading and writing skill level. So a lot of these things trace back to, childhood dysfunctionalities that often do happens in the home. One thing I will make, I will talk about a little bit on the social media thing, because it goes back to what Brother Ray said earlier, as far as relationships. When you ask, how do we infiltrate that? Like, what do we do with this space? And I had a grandmother share this with me. She enlightened me. And this was a grandmother, one of the notorious dudes ever walked Sacramento. And I was sitting with her, and she was telling me not just about his dad, but his dad's dad. And you know, she said something very simple to me, and it just stuck with me. She said, all they really want is attention. You know, she said, all they really want is attention. And so for me, that's what the likes on the social media is about. A lot of times that's what the violence is about. It's about, I am here. You will acknowledge my existence one way or the other. You know, I might not get all the attention for the good stuff, and if I can't get the attention for the good stuff, I get the attention for the bad stuff. Because when I get in trouble in school, at least I'm getting some attention. I get sent to the principal's office, I'm getting some attention. So, you know, one of the methodologies that we use in advanced peace is, you know, spending a considerable amount of time giving them that attention, building that relationship of trust, you know, breaking down some of those walls. And that's a hard thing to do with a young person that's been hurt by adults over and over and over again. And it takes time. And the first thing a young person is going to do when you show up, a traumatized young person is going to do when you show up, hey, I'm your new mentor. I'm going to be your new counselor. First thing they're going to do is act out. Because by them acting out, yeah, get away from me. By them acting out, they're testing you. Do you really want to mess with me? Or do you really care for me? And you don't care for me. And I'm gonna expose you off the bat by just acting out real quick, just to show you ain't got what it takes to deal with me. So what happens is when you come back, and show them, you know, I'm here again, I'm knocking at the door, you know, and you come back again and again, and they realize, man, this dude is really messing with me. This dude really is messing with me, like for real, for real. No matter who I am, the good, the bad, the ugly, they're still supporting me. There, you know, that's what it comes down to. So we make ourselves in our relationship building component, we make ourselves accessible to these young people 365, 24/7. And they know they can call our staff anytime, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and they gonna pick up, because that's how the relationship is established. So it's just, you know, some of the things that you made me think about as you were commentating on that, and some thoughts to add to that topic. I know Brother Ray got some juice for that too, man. So I'm gonna turn it over to Brother Ray. Sprinkle.
Yeah, no, those are all great points. I think the other thing we forget is that we're not going to get no results if we don't make no sacrifice, right? So as soon as the virus came out, we all, you know, all the systems folks went home and stayed away. I stayed out of engagement because we can't, because of the virus. Would have, you know, the homeboys down the street never stopped with relationship, drinking, smoking, being engaged. So they you know, vacuum was created, an attraction to that. And, you know, understanding what this work is really about, you know, and understanding selfless service is really what it boils down to. So getting in a relationship with somebody who might not be ready to change, and if you're not gonna mess with them because they don't want to pull their pants up, or all these old things that we have in our programs, all these rules, you know, you got to do this and do that if you're going to participate, you've already given them the out to take. So it's really about understanding folks and engaging in a way that's going to be meaningful, and understanding the change in what it means to have respect, right? Like before, older generations, respect was given up front until you lost it. Now, we know that most of our young people have been negatively impacted by an adult or somebody who should be caring about them And so you got to earn it, to Khalid's point. But the in understanding what is it going to take, it really is about being willing to influence those that are in our realm, right? Not necessarily just my work capacity. We think of that as being my realm. No, my everyday capacity, my neighbor, we have to really empower folks to really start knowing what to look for and keeping our eyes open, because, we miss opportunities, right? And I'll just speak to mental health. The tension, or the most compelling or the overwhelming idea to kill yourself is a temporary deal. Now we know it comes back in cycles, and it's going to raise, it's going to lower, it's going to come back. But for that moment, it's temporary. But yet it's the second leading cause of death for young people. And so the only way that can be is because we're not leaning in on opportunities, we're not checking, we're not caring. And I think that the first step is just have a commitment to be that person in a young person's life that they don't want to disappoint. Now, does that mean we're going to go fishing and do all this? Maybe not. But just if we can just have enough engagement and let them know we care enough that when it comes down to making a decision, you know what? I don't want to disappoint, Luis. I don't want to disappoint Michael, as far as being that person. And that is the honorable place to have. I think sometimes we buy it off we want the end game and the results of our program and outcomes, and sometimes we take off a little bit more than just simply being at the right place at the right time with the right message. Just a little flicker in somebody else's movie, instead of being the leading co-star, or, I'm coming to save you. Because I can think about the times growing up and even now when you feel like you've done wrong. And if we can just go back to what it feels like to be mad and frustrated and how entitlement seeps in. Oh, well, you want to act like that? Well, this is what I'm going to do. And then living in a society where the message is through the violence that's projected in TV, music, and everywhere else. I mean, that's why folks are inclined to act a certain way. It's because you do feel it on the inside. I can't keep talking about I get mad. I can't, what's going on now? Listening about racism, listening about all these billions and money and this and that. And I'm over here struggling. I'm not struggling. I'm going to do what I need to do and believe in it 100%. And if that means robbing this guy and having funk with those folks, and I'm lined up and we're trying to make it happen, then that's what I'm going to do, and not feel too sorry about it right up front. So it really is a situation that relationship is going to have to break up some of that, what's going on inside. But to feel entitled to do what you want right now is the message in the air. And violence is not, that's not a deterrent, right? I mean, they're not afraid to get out there and risk it all because of the hopelessness that might be setting in as a result of other areas, family, no dad. I mean, you can go on and on and on. It starts getting me kind of triggered, thinking about what it really feels like when you don't think that we're the people that are supposed to care about me, and from that, that's a platform for destruction if you remedy that in a negative way. So
I wanna ask you both, because schools are getting ready. They're gearing up to go back to in-person instruction, and I'm wondering, from both of your vantage points, what our schools can do, because we have teachers and administrators that will watch this. What can they do to be positive contributors to the work that we're talking about here? But before we get into that, Michael has posted something in the chat, and he says he's listening to both of you talk, and he understands the work that we're doing, but he wants to know, how do you stay motivated to do this kind of work, given all the different things that we've talked about here today? What keeps you going on a day-to-day basis to re-engage in this type of work? And I think, let me just add this on there. I think this is a great question that Michael is asking, because I know that for some educators, they feel like, I didn't sign up for this. I just want to be a teacher. I just want to, come to work, go to my class, teach my lesson, and go home. I don't really want to continuously get involved. And so that's one of the reasons why we have a high turnover rate of educators in our communities, right? Because they don't want the challenges that come with dealing with some of the things that we're talking about, these different risks. So how do you all stay motivated to continue pushing forward?
Well, I'll share this with you, Jonah. So it's interesting because I was thinking about this topic today. For some reason, it jumped in my mind. So when I first started college, and I'm a high school dropout, I dropped out of high school. But, when I first, I got back into community college and eventually made it into UC Berkeley and graduated. But when I first got back into college, I wanted to be an educator. For some reason, I had it in my mind, I wanted to be an 8th grade math teacher. Like I knew what grade, I knew what subject. Even though I had dropped out of school, I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I got back into community college. And I don't know why. I think maybe because pre-algebra is something I really enjoyed. It was something that came easy to me once I made it. Math always kind of came relatively easy to me, and I enjoyed pre-algebra. But anyways, I wanted to be an educator. And then when I was at UC Berkeley, I actually got a job with the Berkeley Unified School District. And I worked as what they call an academic mentor. And I worked inside the classroom as kind of a teacher's assistant. But I would work with those kids who missed a lot of days, and then I would pull them out the class and take them to the library and help them catch up on their work and kind of bring them back into class. Was one of my main things. But anyways, I really enjoyed that. Obviously, I didn't go on to become an educator, but I've always worked in partnership with school districts and educators. But the original question, let me answer that, and then we'll get to that part. I think what keeps me going is one, it's kind of personal. So I see myself in these young people. I see myself in them, and I realized I was one bad decision away from being just in the same place they was. Like Brother Ray said, coming from humble beginnings, coming from a family that struggled with poverty. I ain't gonna say we were poor, but we definitely had the food stamps and public assistance. But my mother always found a way to navigate, being a single mom with 3 kids, she found a way to navigate those systems pretty well and demonstrated a really good example for us. I always say my mom was mom and pops at the same time. I didn't even have to trip. I was getting both. I was getting both sides. I didn't even miss a beat. But for me, it's personal. And I see the potential in these young people. And the second part is I'm a very spiritual person. So I see this as God's work. So I see like 2 for 1. I'm getting 2 for 1. I'm making a living for my family, but I'm also doing God's work at the same time. So those are the 2 things that kind of keep me motivated. But speaking to, I didn't sign up for this, and I think yeah, everyone has to. I mean, you gotta. This is a loaded question, because in some aspects you did sign up for it. And if you think you didn't sign up for it, maybe you should do something different. You know what I mean? So that's just a hard reality, because I have this conversation with law enforcement too. And law enforcement say, hey, I didn't sign up for this. Well, actually, yes, you did. And so, if you're not cut out for it, go be a firefighter or something else. But this is part of what you signed up for as a community safety professional officer who we've invested the authority to take a life. And you're one of the few people that we've given that authority to as citizens to do that legally. So yeah, you did sign up for this. But from the teacher side, a teacher can only do so much. I think, to kind of oversimplify, because obviously this is a bigger discussion, I would say, teachers can't be social workers. They can't be the counselor, the therapist, the family dynamics, all of that. And you don't have to be. That's not what we're asking of you. But the young people will, it goes back to that saying, they don't care what you know, so they know that you care, right? And young people can sense sincerity and genuineness. And that goes a long way. That goes a long way. So yes, you have to at least show up, and you have to care enough about these kids to where you see past the bad grades and the saggy pants, to care, to see their humanity, to see their potential, and just to care. That is part of the job. You're not expected to solve all those things. You're not expected to do all of that, but you're expected to infuse in them hope, spirit. Hope, and they can feel your spirit if it's sincere. So you can only do so much. Everybody has to play their position. We can't expect you to play all 9 positions on the baseball field. But if you're gonna be the shortstop, make the stops. You know what I mean? If you're gonna be first baseman, make the catch. Play your role, and then everyone has to do their part. They say it takes a village to raise a family, and it takes a family to raise a child. So I could definitely, I think teachers, man, is one of the hardest jobs out there. So I have a lot of respect for any teacher that signs up for it. But when you do sign up, you sign up for it. You got to own it.
Yeah, absolutely. I just, for me personally, you can do a lot of different things in life, but you won't have any bigger honor than to be able to impact somebody's life. And I don't think we should be looking for teachers. What we need are leaders, and because real leaders serve, right? That's the whole notion of being a leader. And whether you have a position or the title, or you're high up or down low, however you see it, the ones closest to the struggle is who needs to be empowered, because that's true leadership, being able to serve selflessly. But when you're talking about this kind of work, you got to believe it's your purpose. I'm not 7 feet with a 8-foot wingspan, to walk up to the hoop, but life experience absolutely prepared me, I believe, for what's going on in this generation and during this time. And even more than that, I believe in the value of redemption. I believe in the value, of people, and understanding that, really the value of a soul. And if our folks that are struggling got a taste of how good life can really be, doing the right thing. And I'm not talking about materialism. I'm talking about from the inside out, the validation and some of the things, the emotional needs that teachers are in a position to cultivate, to recognize somebody's efforts, right? Every day, day in, day out, engagement, task, helping them learn, helping them get a self of confidence. I think school is the biggest opportunity in any institution to have an impact on a young person. And that's why the ambition to learn, the willingness to learn, understanding why some of us used to stay in at recess with our hands all sweaty, refusing to finish those last 3 problems. And nobody ever asked about feelings, and it was just task oriented, right? So it comes back down, I think, the spoiler alert is, man, it's all about love. And we all have different capacities. Some of us have more capacity, some less, within our systems. And if we work in public service institutions, we need to be finding ways for our systems to work for the people, and quit playing letter by the law and liking the folks who are easy to like, and doing the letter, and no discretion for the ones that are a little more difficult. And I think that is a test, and that's a testament to myself. When I'm getting along with little Johnny, and Johnny's a good kid, that doesn't say anything about me. Who's the test is, in the character, the quality of character is who can embrace the one who nobody else wants to care about. And so that's where we got to start understanding what this is about. But I think we forget what it's like. We forget what adolescence was like. We've all been through some kind of struggles or challenges or rejection. And, you know, how dare us forget, you know, what that was all about, and then come back to get into a system of service. And I'm worried about my degree and my career, my paycheck. Well, dummy, you got into public service. There's not a whole lot of my involved in that. And so when we can just stay true to understanding the value and that people, you know, have unlimited potential, then we'll give it our best every time we have the opportunity. And we can't lose sight of that.
Yeah, I would agree with the both of you. I think purpose has a lot to do with getting in and staying in this type of work. But I think it's the same for educators as well, right? Like, I think the best teachers, the best principals, the best counselors, those are the ones who really feel like it's their purpose to do that type of work. You know, different from other professions. When you get in this type of work, it can't just be about the paycheck at the end of the day,
right?
Because the paycheck will never accurately reflect all that is required to do this type of job. So, you know, last question, because we are quickly running out of time, but this hour go by fast when you're having fun. You know, just what advice do you have for educators moving forward? You know, whether we are in-person instruction, whether we are distance learning, like, who knows what the future has for us, but what is some advice that you have for educators who are working with youth across the spectrum of prevention, intervention, and interruption?
I'll let my brother Ray go first, since he's the educator.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I would say to be mindful of your influence, and don't dismiss or be dismissive of the students who's struggling the most. If you work to better serve that student, you're going to win most of the rest of the classroom. It's what I've learned is that out of, let's just say, if I was working in a unit, even in a classroom setting, the 2 or 3 that are the toughest personalities or have the most challenges influence the other 15. So you can't cut them out. You got to embrace. And and it doesn't matter if it's what level in a classroom. You know, it's about serving the ones, like I said, that we know that are struggling most, and you're going to win the rest of the classroom, because I really believe that it transpires in the culture of what's going on in that environment. And when the students see you caring about, you know, a tough personality or the one that's struggling the most, it does something for them as far as safety and security goes. And this work is not always it's not a paycheck, but there's nothing else you can do to be validated from the inside out. So.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, you know, I appreciate that. Yeah, I would first say that, you know, it's one of the most honorable positions to have. Unfortunately, our society doesn't, you know, honor teachers the way a lot of other societies do around the world. But it's actually, you know, many societies, teachers are up there. I mean, and so we need to, you know, we definitely need to support our teachers a lot better than we currently do in our school systems. But I would say, you know, allow yourself to think outside the box. Like Brother Ray is saying, allow yourself to bring in some innovation as much as you can within the sphere that you have that influence, whether it's curriculum, supplement of the curriculum, or how you teach certain curriculum, and to get their attention. And, you know, I know one of the things, obviously there's a lot of disciplinary things that come up in classrooms. One of the things that we partnered with a school district with is doing restorative justice practices. And we did a little different because there's restorative circles and restorative practices. Restorative circles are something that we worked on with high schools. And then restorative practices, we actually worked on directly with elementary school, where we actually trained all the elementary school teachers. This was done at Santa Rosa School District on restorative practices. So they could implement these practices in the classroom without having to send kids out, send them to the principal, send them out, suspending kids, elementary kids. When we're suspending elementary kids for multiple days at a time, I mean, that's just something just not right. So we incorporated restorative practices. So we have to, we definitely have to work within, the resources that we have. But I think there's a lot of room for creative thinking. And I think we just have to allow ourselves to tap into the creative side and allow ourselves innovative ways of engaging these young people. And like I said, just let them know that they don't care what you know until they know that you care. And that comes through. They can feel that. They can see it. So I would add those two things to what Brother Ray already said.
Appreciate both of you with that. I would just add that, there's a reason why this series is titled Diversity Now. And unfortunately, all of our schools don't have representation for our students that need it. And so if you are a school, or if you are an educator right now, you know that your school site lacks representation, then I would say go find one of these types of brothers out there in your local community that is doing the work, that has a love for working with the youth, and have that special connection, because it will completely transform not only your school site, but it will transform the type of relationships that young people have with you and with their education. I've seen it over and over again. And the thing is, we out here. I've heard some people say, well, we can't find representation. Sometimes, like Brother Khalid said, you got to get a little creative, and you can't look in the usual places to find representation. Sometimes you got to go in other places and develop those types of partnerships that will bring folks to your campus, that can help connect with the young people, help bring the additional care and services that are needed to deal with the risk factors. But all in all, I just appreciate you all jumping online with me today and having this conversation. We haven't had this type of conversation as part of our series, and so it was a much needed conversation, and hopefully we could do it again one day. But for today, you all stay safe. Try to avoid that rain as much as possible. And I look forward, I can't wait to see y'all in person here soon. Hopefully we have something come up where we can all kind of see each other and commune like we used to back in the day.
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, likewise, brother. Good to see you, even if it's virtually for now, man. Good to know that you're well. Appreciate the invite and the opportunity.
No, I feel the same way.
You too, Brother Ray. Good to see you too. It's been a minute to see you, man. So
Yeah.
I gotta catch up with you too.
Absolutely. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Next week, we will have Dr. Bishop and Dr. Shackelford talking about trilingual education. So make sure to tap in then. And for now, I will see everyone in a week.
All right.
Take care.